Alrighty, so welcome to our first module in a while, Module 1 of Locke, and we have a lovely picture of him here. I actually think you should go and try and find this close up. It's a beautiful painting, but he does look like a bit of a weird old man.
Which is very ageist.
I know, but it comes across, he just looks like very insubstantial. No, that's not right. He comes across as very, vague.
In his writing.
Well, in his writing, and I feel like in that picture, that's what...
okay.
I read his text before seeing his picture, and...
That's really interesting.
This picture has corresponded with the frustrating nature of his text. So, on that point, I think it's worth noting that with this text, apparently, there is a lot of vagueness. It is quite a difficult text, and that for us, it's going to be a process of figuring out what we feel like is a coherent interpretation of it. So we need to avoid getting frustrated and realise that at times there isn't actually some clear answers about what he really, really means, and it's about us coming with an interpretation that makes sense and that is valid.
Absolutely.
Okay? The other thing to note about Locke is that he is a dualist. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
And he was a lover of Descartes in particular.
Okay.
So, which idea of Descartes do you reckon he loves?
So, does he love the idea that the mind is separate from the body and is a spiritual substance?
He definitely does like that idea. So, he, when we get up to it a bit later on, and we're talking about some things to do with thinking and the mind, we'll see that it is quite a separate understanding to the, and quite a separate idea, from the body.
Okay.
So at the start of Locke's text, on pages, I think it is 35 and 36, he just introduces this idea of identity, and his idea of what identity is. And I think this is really helpful just in terms of this topic generally. And what he's saying is identity is the way that we know that something is a particular thing as compared to something else. So how we distinguish one thing. So he uses the example of a pen. How he distinguishes one particular pen from another pen. That pen could look exactly the same, but it's how he tells one pen is different to the other.
Yeah. So did you say in the textbook they use the phrase the principle of individuation?
Yes.
Is that right?
They definitely do, and that is the idea that what it is that makes something the same thing over time, even. So how do we know that a pen is a particular pen over time?
So we went over this a little bit in my class, but just to reiterate, because I think it's important, when we talk about personal identity, or when we question what makes something have the same identity over time, we're not asking... the question is not, do you have the exact same personality over time, for instance. So Tim, as you grow older, your personality might change a bit.
Yep.
You might become older and wiser.
Yep.
But we still identify you as the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question we're asking is, are you the same person, not do you have the exact same personality?
Okay.
So is this pen the same pen that it was?
Yeah.
Not has it gone through some changes? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so on page 37, Locke says, and I think this is question 8 in your readers, Locke says that we need to figure out the meaning of 3 different ideas, and it's that of, and I guess then the identity of these 3 things, and that's substances, man, and persons. Okay, now it's really important, particularly the distinction between man and persons.
So I think what he's getting at is that there's different kinds of things. Some things are substances, some things are men.
Yep.
And some things are persons.
Yeah.
And each of those for each of those, there's a different way of telling if they have the same personal identity over time.
Yes, a different principle of individuation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with substances, what he's referring to is non-living things. So he goes on about the example of a chair. And if the chair a leg breaks off the chair, does it have the same identity?
Most of us would say yes.
Yes, most of us would. Locke potentially says something different.
Okay.
And we will leave you in suspense on that and deal with it in class. And he talks about a few other different weird substances in the text, which we'll go over quickly in class. But the main distinction he wants to make is between man and persons.
So Locke's distinction between a man and a person is as follows. So what I get from this is Locke is saying that in a way there's two parts to us.
Yeah.
One part is a man, or I guess in other words a human.
Yes.
And the other part is a person.
Yeah.
So the first part, the man, is simply the physical structure.
Yeah.
So he talks here about the body.
Yeah.
The shape of the body. And I guess the fact that the body persists throughout time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So his theory here is for the identity of man is quite similar to the same body theory.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
So what a confusing part of Locke is that he does use some of the other theories for certain things, like in this case, same body theory for man.
Yeah.
But his key theory, which is for our person,
Yeah.
is different, is not the same body theory. In fact, he rejects the same body theory and says it doesn't work.
Okay.
Yes.
For person.
For person, yeah.
All right, so the key thing to take away, or in my class we described it as personal identity criteria. Like, what are the criteria that make you the same person over time? Yeah. So are you saying that he would have different personal identity criteria for the man part of you and for the person part of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The man part of you for him is purely kind of like your physical structure.
Yeah.
So, and that's why it's good to think about when he's saying man, think about he's saying you as a human, like being able to identify you as a particular living organism. So identifying you as a human as opposed to identifying that elephant over there as an elephant or that parrot on my shoulder as a parrot.
Yep.
Okay?
So the man thing is just like saying the parrot, because it's got the physical structure of the parrot.
Yeah.
You've got the physical structure of the man.
We can't be parrots because we've got the physical structure of men.
Okay, I get it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is where his idea of, his love of Descartes starts to really come through. So his idea of the person, which sits, I guess, alongside that of the man, which is that particular Descartes idea of having a separate...
Yeah, okay, I can see the dualism, mind and body thing.
Yeah, so the person is the thinking, intelligent being. So it's basically our mind, yeah? It's it's that thing that's separate, that has reason and reflection and consider itself as itself, the same thinking thing in different times and places.
Yeah.
So this and that last half of that quote in particular is really starting to introduce you to the key concepts for him, which is by considering itself as itself, that's very similar to our idea of consciousness, of being aware and knowing ourselves, and then knowing ourselves as the same thinking through time, through times and places. That's then his theory of
So when I was 10 years old, I knew that I was myself.
Yeah.
When now I still know that I'm myself.
Yeah.
So therefore...
You're the same person.
Okay, so that's his personal identity criteria for being a person.
Yeah.
Being the same person.
So we'll get to that. Yeah, definitely. And we'll go back over that in a second. So on page 38, he goes on his long rant story thing about the prince and the parrot, okay? But it is very long-winded, but it is actually quite an interesting point that he's making here. And this point is a key implication for this distinction between the man and the person. And the point he's making is that, okay, well, you might have a parrot, or you might have a man. to be a person, you have to be thinking, and you have to be able to use reason and stuff like that. So potentially, you could have a really, really smart parrot that is able to think and
consider itself as itself.
Yes, and be aware of itself. So therefore, that parrot would be a person.
A parrot and a person, all in one.
Yes, all in one. And then, on the other hand, it is foreseeable that you have a man who is quite dull and dim, I think are words that he uses, and that is therefore, it also says irrational, because reason is very important.
Irrational.
So if somebody is irrational, again, quite interesting, that somebody being irrational potentially is not a person.
Yes, now this is very interesting because it has severe implications for some contemporary debates, like what if you are brain dead or something?
Yeah.
He would consider you not a person, just a man.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah.
And that might have different implications for how we treat people in that situation.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So back to focusing now on his idea of what a person is, and flowing on from that, what the identity of that person is. How do we identify a person through time? Key to this is his idea of consciousness, and by that he means this quote here. So, only by that consciousness which is inseparable from thinking, a key thing as well. So consciousness, from thinking flows consciousness, and they're connected. And as it seems to me essential to it, it being impossible for anyone to perceive without perceiving that he does perceive.
So consciousness, it's the same definition that Armstrong gives. Consciousness is being aware of your own awareness, perceiving your own perception.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
And so I take it that...
And the point he's making here as well is that for anyone to perceive, so to think, basically, they have to be perceiving that they do perceive. So it's a further way of for him to say that consciousness and thinking are hand in hand.
Okay. So, yes, I take it that consciousness is his identity criterion for being a person.
Yeah.
Cool.
And this just reiterates that. So, since consciousness always accompanies thinking, and it is that which makes everyone to be what he calls self, and thereby distinguishes himself from all other thinking things, in this alone consists personal identity. Okay. So it is from his consciousness and using that to know himself. That's what he gets his personal identity.
So as soon as you stop knowing yourself and being aware of your awareness, you stop being the same person.
Potentially, yeah. So that's something he'll actually deal with in numerous ways in the rest of his text, is issues of where you don't know a particular part of yourself, and that also key to that is the idea of memories, which we're about to get to. Just on a kind of quick side note, a key thing to think about throughout his text is whether he's putting forward a theory of personal identity from a first person perspective or a third person perspective. And I think a key thing to take away from this definition, or this statement here, is that it is very much focusing on the first person experience of identity. It's about
I see what you're saying.
You knowing yourself and knowing that,
So from my
distinguishes
perspective,
you from you.
Tim, if you lost your memories or stopped being conscious, you would, from your perspective, you would stop being the same person. But from my perspective, I might still consider you the same person.
Yeah,
is
definitely,
that what you're saying?
Definitely.
And
so
he's
it's going to be
focusing
determined
on
by
what makes you the same person.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And his theory of personal identity basically consists in, let me get this right, so the fact that you have a memory of being conscious in the past, that is what connects you now to you in the past. And makes you the same person. Not the same man, but the same person over time. Yeah.
So consciousness is kind of what you'll use to determine who you are right now.
Okay, so
I'm
right now I am
conscious of
conscious of
myself.
myself as myself.
Yeah. And then to be able to trace yourself back through time,
Mm.
you're going to rely on memories to then create your kind of path of personal identity. So
Yeah.
with this quote, I think what he's using kind of hand in hand with the consciousness, this use of consciousness, is that as far as this consciousness or as far as our memories can be extended backwards to any past action or thought, so far reaches the identity of that person.
So does that mean that, because when you're a baby, you're not really forming memories?
No.
So does that mean I'm not the same person I was when I was a baby?
I think that's a very key question that we're going to have to...
Well, I think he would say, yeah, I'm not.
No, I think
yeah.
he would. I think he would say that too.
And
I think
I
he
mean,
would say potentially, maybe he would even say that that baby isn't even a person.
Yeah, I think he probably would, because you don't have the... Well, I was going to introduce this term, the mental connections, because this theory of personal identity is known as the mental connections theory, because it's all about memory of your own consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's what connects you to yourself.
But it's
in
also
the past.
about the fact that they're not going to be a baby, isn't according to him, a thinking intellectual person, a thing.
So it's just a
intellectual
man.
thing.
A baby is
It's
just a man.
Potentially just a man.
Because it's
not using reason and
it's interesting.
reflection.
Hey? Again, I can so see the connections with contemporary debates. Like, well, I don't know. Could this even be relevant to like abortion and euthanasia and stuff like that? Or maybe not euthanasia, but yeah, he would consider the life of an infant less valuable than the life of a grown person, because I'm just kind of shooting from the hip here, but that seems to make sense.
Yeah.
And I was also going to say, so what would he say about, so it's all to do with consciousness. What if you lose consciousness? Does that mean you're not the same person?
Potentially, yeah. So he does go on about this, particularly in terms of memory loss, quite a bit.
But then I guess if you regain consciousness and then can connect your memories to yourself before the loss of consciousness, you'd still be the same person as you were then.
He raises the issue of like somebody who gets drunk and doesn't have any memory of what they're doing when they're drunk as well.
So if you're super drunk and you kill someone, are you the same person that committed that crime? Contemporary debates.
We will come to it. We will come to it.
It's pretty good, really. I mean, I think the theory has its flaws, but it has a lot of sense to it.
Yeah,
I think our memories are what determine ourselves, in a way.
So, to leave you with a very simple idea, consciousness/memories equal identity. Okay? That is the key Lockean idea. You've got it straight up. It's not like the others where we're kind of building towards it. Now you've got the key idea, his theory, and what we're going to look at now is kind of his just ramblings about some objections to his theory and also his rejection of other theories like same body and same soul theory. He rejects both of those.
Wow, okay. Yeah. So you've got it. You've got the Locke summary.
Yeah.
Well done. See ya.